And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed. To you it shall be for food. Genesis 1:29. Man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat to the full. Psalm 78:25. Everyday Manna with Lisa.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Everyday Manna. Today we are going to make one of my favorite things to eat, and that is homemade vegetable beef soup. Now, I'm a person that eats soup year-round, and this happens to be one of my absolute favorite soups. So we're going to make that today, and go alongside it, we're going to make a loaf of homemade bread, and then we're going to make some chocolate-dipped strawberries at the end. So let's get started. Now, what you want to start with is your beef. Now, I think that Chuck makes the best beef for soup. So if you find a whole chuck roast on sale, go ahead and buy that, and then you can cut out the big chunks of fat out of the chuck roast, because it is a fattier cut of meat, but that fat is what gives you flavor. The thing is, chuck needs to cook low and slow for a long time. So oftentimes what I will do is put the beef in my crock pot and put that on low and let that simmer all day long, and then I can finish up the soup on the stove when I get home. But today we're just going to do it in the pot. I have a pot here, and I have just some cubes of the chuck roast that I have cut up. And in the grocery store, you can find the beef cubes already cut up in a package. But the thing is, you don't know where that came from, because they use the scraps. Maybe it could be from the round, it could be from the tenderloin, it could be from the chuck, it could be from the, the bottom round or the top round. It could be from the eye round. It could be from any cut of the beef. So I don't really like those, but you can use that if if you just don't want to cut it up yourself. You can use that. Just know that you're going to have a mixture of different cuts of beef in there. And to that, I'm going to add just some beef broth. That's all I'm going to put on that. And again, you can totally do this in the crock pot. Okay, add a little bit of salt, maybe, a teaspoon or so. Remember that beef broth has some sodium in it. Now, I do buy reduced sodium. I noticed in the grocery store the other day, they even make no salt added. So I'm going to add, this is a half a teaspoon measure, so I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt. And I want to add an onion, because I want that onion flavor in the beef. So I'm going to have one medium onion here that I'm going to dice up. Just peel it in my trash can. I'm on the hunt for onion goggles. I haven't seen any yet, but I'm looking for them, because they say that really keeps your eyes from watering. Back when I wore contacts, I could cut onions all day long, and it never bothered me. Now I don't wear contacts anymore. And I tear up every time. But they say those onion goggles really work. So if you know where I can find those, send me an email and let me know. It's everydaymanna.net, and you can send me a message on there if you know where those onion goggles are. Then I'm going to add this to the pot. And I'm just going to let that simmer. Now, that needs to simmer on its own for about, I would say a good 2.5 hours before you add the vegetables to it, because that beef needs to get good and tender. So we're just going to put the lid on that, bring it up to a simmer, reduce the heat, and let that simmer for about 2 hours. Now, we are going to make a loaf of homemade bread. I love homemade bread, but I don't have all kinds of time to cook it at home. Now, I can make homemade bread by hand. It just takes a long time. But I have discovered this little jewel. And this is a bread machine. And if you don't have a bread machine, let me tell you, you're missing something. They're not expensive. I found this one at Walmart, and I love it. Absolutely love it. This particular one, my brand, by the way, not sponsored, they didn't send it to me or anything, is Oster. I found it at Walmart, and it makes you can adjust it to a 1.5 or a 2 pound loaf. I always make the 2 pound loaf because we eat it. But there's tons of different recipes out there. This is just the one that I do. You need 1 cup and 3/8 of a cup of warm water. Then a couple of tablespoons of butter. If I can find mine, I don't want to use that. I want to use this knife. Just good, real butter, and just put that down in the bottom. You don't need to stir it or anything. There's a little attachment in the bottom of this that goes around and around that'll mix it for you. It really, truly is just dump and stir. And then in this bowl, I have 4 cups of bread flour. Now, you do need to be careful and make sure that you get bread flour. It's sold in the regular section of your grocery store where you buy the all-purpose and the self-rising and all that. You will see a package called bread flour. That's what you need because the protein content is a little different in bread flour and regular flour. To this, I'm going to add some powdered milk, about 2 tablespoons of powdered milk, some sugar, and some salt. Now, I like to mix mine with just a whisk before I put it in there. I just use a whisk. If you have a sifter, you could use that, but honestly, this does just as good. Now, let me give you a little hint on flour before we put that in there. When you are measuring, this is the one time, and I had all this pre-measured out. This is the one occasion that I measure. Let me grab a measuring cup here. Let me get this one. The way you want to get your flour out is take of your regular container when you're measuring it out. Take your cup or something like that, and you see how I'm kind of aerating that flour a little bit before I measure. And then take your cup, fill it up to the brim, and then take a knife and go over the top like that to measure out your flour. If you don't aerate it first and you just go in there and you dig it like that, you could really get too much flour. So you always want to go in with something, a spoon or I just use my measuring cup, and aerate that flour first. Then lightly go in and then do that. Don't pack it in there or you will end up with too much. Now I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back I'm going to show you how to put this in there and then add the yeast. I'll be back in just a second. All right, now we've got our water and our butter down in the bread machine, and you will need to read your bread machine's directions. They are all different. You should have gotten an instruction manual with it. Mine has, you can't really see this, but it has on the menu, it says, you can do like basic, French, whole wheat, sweet, express bake, European dough, bagels, jam, whatever you want to do. So I'm doing just basic bread. So my menu, I'm going to put over here, I've got menu select, so I'm going to make sure I have it on number 1. Okay. Then I'm doing a 2-pound loaf, so you want to make sure that the little arrow up there is on 2 pound. And I don't like my crusts really, really dark, so I always put my crust color on medium. Okay, now in the bottom I have water and butter, and then I've got my flour mixture that I'm gonna attempt to not get all over me. I'm gonna just put this down in the bottom. Don't stir it. It's the coolest thing, I'm telling you. I've converted so many people to bread makers. They come to my house and I've got this bread and they're like, how did you do that? I'm like, a bread machine. So good. And you're not dealing with preservatives. It's so delicious. And these little machines are not at all expensive, and they are well worth the money. And you can do so many different kinds of breads. Now, zoom in here if you can. Don't stir it. What you want to do is take your clean finger in the top, and you're making a little well in the middle of the flour, not touching the water. Okay, no water. And then we're going to add our yeast into that little well. It's important that that yeast not touch that water yet. And when you're buying yeast, what I do is in the baking aisle where you get the same flour, usually on the top shelf, there will be the little 3 packets of yeast, and then there are little jars of yeast, rapid rising yeast. There's one that says specifically yeast for bread machines, and that's the one you want. Get that, measure out however much yeast you need for the recipe that you're doing, and I'll have all of this on the website. But and then once you've opened it, keep it in the refrigerator, and mine keeps for like 6 months. You'll use it up. That's all you need to do. Put your lid down, hit start. That's it. Now, you got a timer on here. This will take 3 hours and 25 minutes. And what this does, okay, can you hear it? It's stirring it. You can see down in the top, it's stirring all that together, and then it'll get, real loud. It'll stir it all together. It actually will stir it. It kneads it. It causes it to rise because of the heat, and then it bakes it. It's done. That's all the hands-on work that you do with a bread machine. I absolutely love this thing. It really, really does good. And I just leave it set while I do my work. It'll get loud occasionally when it's doing its quick little, stirring it all together. So our beef, I have one cooked. So I've got our beef done here. And here's where you can use what you like, whatever kind of vegetables that you want. I have scrubbed my vegetables, and I'm kind of a traditionalist when it comes to soup. I like celery, carrots, potatoes, corn, and peas in mine, and of course tomatoes. If you have home canned tomatoes, by all means use those home canned tomatoes. I don't have any here, so I'm just going to use some that I bought, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But if this is where you can use your own preferences. If you like okra, sometimes I put okra in mine. I do like okra. I just didn't have any today. And frozen works perfectly fine. And sometimes, honestly, I will chop up my celery and potatoes and then buy just the frozen mixed vegetables and put in there. If you want to do that, that's fine too. Today we're just going to use the ones we chop. Now, my beef is still in there. I'm just going to add the vegetables as I chop it. We've already got our beef. We've got our onion in that delicious broth. We're going to add that. Okay, do you hear my machine? Can you hear it? I'll get my microphone. You hear it? It's going round and round. It's mixing it. I love it. I encourage you to try a bread machine. It's really good bread too, and you don't have any of the preservatives or any of that in there. So I've got some carrots here that my little sweet Elijah peeled for me. He did such a good job peeling these carrots. So we're just going to trim them. He's already peeled them. Get the ends off. And I'm going to cut. I've got my soup on. We're going to cut up our vegetables. About the same size as our celery. Now, if you want to put other vegetables like zucchini, that kind of thing in here, I would wait till the soup's almost done to add the zucchini because that cooks very, very quickly. These are harder vegetables that take a little bit longer to cook. This is one of those things that you can make and leave it on the stove, and the longer it simmers, the better it is. So I've got in total 5 carrots because I like a lot of vegetables in my soup. And again, if you want to use the frozen mixed vegetables, they even make soup blend vegetables in the freezer department of your grocery store. They're good too. They put lima beans in some of those blends, and I like that in my soup. And this is something that you can make and leave, maybe your schedule with whoever you're feeding. Everybody needs to eat at a different time. I hope that's not the case, but sometimes it is. This is something that keeps warm on the stove or in the crock pot, and people can eat as they want. It's even better the next day as it sits. And this is one of those things, sometimes if I have some left over and we may be, not going to be able to eat it the next day or in the next couple of days, I will take my cooked soup, portion it out in individual serving size freezer containers, leave a little headspace for it to expand as it freezes, and then freeze it. And then when you want homemade soup, all you got to do is thaw it and heat it up, and it's done. Great, great thing to make and freeze ahead. Now, I'm just going to stir that around, and I'm going to cover that up. Now, I want to add a little more liquid to that because I like a brothy soup. So I've got some chicken stock, and it's okay to mix it. It tastes better, actually. And I'm going to add some chicken broth, just a box of chicken broth, to my soup. I do have a small pot of water here coming up to a boil because I'm going to add some macaroni, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And then I have just some canned tomatoes, in the jar. I have whole ones. What I like to do is over my soup pot, drain them because I'm going to cut them up. These are whole tomatoes, and I prefer to cut up my own tomatoes. But if you want to buy the diced up tomatoes, feel free to do that. I just prefer the whole ones. I think they taste better in this particular dish. Just drain them and then put them up on your cutting board, and then just take a knife. Be careful because they'll squirt on you, and just cut them into whatever size chunks you want. I'm just going to chop up these tomatoes and then put them in the soup. And when I come back, we're going to make some chocolate dipped strawberries. I'll be back in just a minute. All right, now our soup is simmering, and I have here some Yukon Gold potatoes that I have scrubbed. If you like to peel your potatoes, you can. I just really prefer the peeling on them. And I've just got these diced, and I'm going to add them to my soup pot that is getting very, very full. And I have a pot of simmering water here, and I'm going to add my macaroni to that water. I like to cook my macaroni. I like macaroni in my soup, but the pasta, whatever you choose, in a separate pan. Reason being, pasta has a lot of starch, and it will absorb all of your liquid in your soup and make it very, very starchy and thick, and I don't want that. So I cook my macaroni separately and then add it at the very end to my soup. So I've just got some water. Let me add a little salt to that water right here. And I'm going to add just some macaroni. I'm going to cook a little extra because I got a little boy right here that wants some macaroni and cheese. So I'm going to make him some macaroni and cheese after a while. So I'm just going to cook that a little bit extra here. So I'm just going to let that go for about 6 minutes or so. And then when I come back, we are going to make the strawberries. We're just going to let that simmer. Oh, let me tell you one more thing. We're going to add just some corn. You can use frozen, fresh, or drained canned corn if you want to, and some peas because I like that in my soup. And that's it. All right, now our soup is simmering away. Our macaroni's done. And all I'm going to do is drain it. I got a full soup pot and carefully add it to the soup. Well, this is not going to work. Let me get this one. You could drain it in the drainer if you wanted to. But again, I want to keep some of it out of the soup so I can add some cheese for a certain little boy that likes mac and cheese. And you know I always do that at home. When I make vegetable soup, I drain it, and then I just add sliced American cheese to it. Don't know why I do that. Stir it up, let it melt. It's really good. Just the slices. Now, let that go. My soup is simmering. The bread is done. Let's talk about some chocolate dipped strawberries. In the produce department of the grocery store the other day, I saw this, and I've never used these, but I am a huge fan. I've got some white chocolate and some dark chocolate. It's just these little discs, just like this. Put it in the microwave for 30 seconds. There's my timer. Oops, let me clear that. 30 seconds. Stir it, and 30 seconds more is about enough. Don't overdo it. Hold on here. Now, let's just slice our bread while we're waiting on that. This is what the loaf looks like when it comes out of my bread machine. And don't forget, by the way, on the bottom, take out that little hook that's in the bread machine. That's part of it, because it'll stick in the bread. You got to take that out. And then here is your homemade bread. Look at that, how good that looks. Oh, I love to just cut it in half, and then I cut it on its side and cut slices, and then slather it with some butter, and it is wonderful. We'll get that in just a second. Now let's check our chocolate. They will look the very same. You got to kind of stir it around just a little bit, and they'll start melt. It's starting to melt. 30 more seconds ought to do it. Our soup is pretty much done. Look at this, how good it looks. Look at that. If that's not health in a bowl, I don't know what is. Yummy, yummy, yummy. This has always been one of my favorite things to eat. I remember as a little girl, my mom would make vegetable soup, and I always got really happy when I was in elementary school. They made homemade, you know, it was just a different day and time, many years ago. But the cafeteria would make homemade soup, and oh, I remember those days, and I always wanted to get lunch through the cafeteria on those days. Now, look at the chocolate before I stir it. You see how it still looks kind of, well, you can't really see it too good. Some of the wafers are still looking formed, but when you stir it, they just melt right up, and you have got a delicious chocolate goodness going on. I've got some nice strawberries that I've washed. We're just gonna dip them down in there, and I use the spoon to kind of help get it on there. I love chocolate dipped strawberries. I just absolutely adore them. Let the excess drip off, and then I'm just gonna put it on a pretty little tray. I've got some already dipped in the white chocolate, but I'm going to do something different here in just a second, because this comes in white chocolate and dark chocolate. And then I'm going to take the ones I dipped. It forms like this little hard shell, okay? And I'm going to dip that down in the dark chocolate on the bottom, just to kind of make it look beautiful. Oh, doesn't that look pretty? Or you could just take the chocolate and drizzle over it if you wanted to. However you want to do it would be fine. Just make it look pretty. And then dip the rest of your chocolate ones. And you could take the white chocolate and drizzle over your chocolate strawberries. Just makes it pretty and delicious. So let's serve up this meal, and then I'll finish dipping my strawberries. I've got a soup bowl just waiting on me, a ladle. This reminds me of my mother. She made the best soup. Oh, I love it. And I eat it year round. It does not have to be cold outside for me to want soup. I like it year round. Now, if you'll notice, very uncharacteristic of me, I did not add any pepper. but I add it to my finished bowl because not everybody likes pepper in their soup. Me, I do, but not everybody does. But there you go. It's a homemade, easy, delicious homemade soup and a wonderful slice of our bread with some butter on there. You could take this and warm it up for like 30 seconds after it's, cooled down, and it'll melt that butter right off of there. But there you go, a delicious, easy, quick meal that you can use your slow cooker and your bread machine, and you've got a good, healthy dinner ready in a flash. Thank you for joining with me, and I will see you next time on Everyday Manna.
Thank you for watching Everyday Manna with Lisa. This program is made possible by viewers like you. Your support is continually needed to keep Christian programming on the air. Please send your best financial gift to Living Faith Television in care of Everyday Manna, P.O. Box 1867, Abingdon, Virginia 24212.